It has been started. You can go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another roundtable discussion on behalf of the Council for Strategic Affairs. We have a very interesting evening and very lively discussion in this roundtable session.
Yeah, I can hear you guys now. So, hello, can you hear me?
Kindly unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry.
Uh,
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So, a little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. I am going to share my screen so that you guys can look at the slides. So Council for Strategic Affairs imparts education in the field of international relations. Council for Strategic Affairs fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. CSA encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. Having said that, Council for Strategic Affairs does not take sides in any geopolitical issue. It only provides a platform to discuss and have deliberations. Council for Strategic Affairs aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. Council for Strategic Affairs does not support violence or terrorism in any form. Our activities include a monthly roundtable discussion that is held on second Monday of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern Daytime. We do have a monthly guest lecture series by a domain expert. We organize symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote scholarly activities in the form of publication of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. So the subject of today's roundtable discussion is the question of Sindhudesh. And a lot of people would ask, why this particular topic? I guess there will be a lot of curiosity. And by the end of the presentations by panel members and question and answer, I think this curiosity would be resolved. So for just sake of reference, this is the map of Sindh province or Sindhudesh. I'm very sort of, interested. Here is this district Dadu. When I used to be in pre-medical, I had a classmate whose last name was Dadu. And this is the district of Sukur. And my professor of psychiatry came from district of Sukur. So again, the Sindh province map or Sindhudesh map. Again, the same thing. This is the capital, Karachi, and I just put this picture for a point that I will make later on. So question of Sindhudesh. There was a press release from Sindhi Foundation Executive Director, Munawwar Laghari, and the title of press release in ANI was Pakistan's Independence Darkest Day in Sindh's History. The press release went on and stated that Pakistani agencies kidnap Sindhi people, disappear them, brutally kill them, abduct young Sindhi Hindu girls to convert them, marry them off against their will. The press release further stated Pakistan is taking lands of Sindh, sea, rivers, forests, mountains, and Sindhis cannot even cry against these atrocities in the province. If they raise their voice, they get arrested or disappeared or killed. Some of the people have mentioned other issues pertaining to Sindh. So I will gloss over those things and I will come to our CSA housekeeping rules. Our housekeeping rules state that you should mute yourself to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please do not try to interrupt our esteemed speakers when they are speaking. Only those members of audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions. We don't allow anonymous people to ask the questions. We try to use the chat function for the questions, conduct it smoothly. So you can write your questions in the chat function. Please be precise and specific in asking a question. Please do not send detailed commentary in the form of a monologue, because if that is done, that will not be read as a question. And lastly, we are recording this session. So at some point in time, this would be available on our YouTube channel, usually within 24 hours. Sometimes we put it on other platforms, including Vimeo channel. So we have a number of discussants, and I will introduce each discussant before they start speaking. I must add that we did not deliberately, advertise the names. There was some concern about safety. There's an advisory in Europe about threats of physical harm to the dissidents from a particular country by agencies of that country. In fact, in England and all over Europe, that advisory is operative. So we don't want to quote unquote advertise the names, but I will introduce each speaker as they come. Our first speaker is Mr. Raj Cole from Chicago. He is the Director of Community Outreach for Indo-American Kashmir Forum. He himself has experienced the lived experience of being a refugee, being persecuted, being displaced from the land of his family's birth. His family had to leave the state from which his family comes, had to migrate to New Delhi. He came here. He is very active socially, involved in youth affairs, a number of social organizations. And there's a very particular reason why Mr. Raj Cole is here as a discussant in this panel. He has a keen sense of study of history. So when we are discussing the question of Sindhudesh, it is not a recent phenomenon. The province of Sindh or land of Sindhudesh was cradle of an ancient civilization. And everyone knows that ancient civilization was the Indus Valley civilization, which is nowadays called Sindhu Saraswati civilization. I know that he's a very keen student of history, so no better way to talk about the question of Sindhudesh than discussing the history of Indus Valley civilization or Sindhu Saraswati civilization. So friends, I welcome Mr. Raj Cole to talk about the history of Indus Valley civilization. Raj Cole, please. You're muted, sir.
Sorry. Thank you, Adityanji. Appreciate the introduction. Shall I share my slides, or are you going to share the slides?
You please go ahead and share the slides yourself.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Can everyone see my screen, please?
Yes, we are able to.
Thank you. I just want to quickly introduce myself in terms of I have the Saraswat heritage. When I say Saraswat heritage, that means my forefathers came from the same Saraswat area, which is the current Sindh state, and the adjoining areas of Rajasthan, Gujarat, and all those areas. The civilization, Indus Valley civilization, was the abode of learning, knowledge, compassion, and love, as we know. And my forefathers moved from the Sindhu area, which was the Saraswat river, as during the course of time, the Saraswat basin dried up, and there are reasons, and I'll talk briefly about that as well. They ended up moving towards north, which was the valley of Kashmir, and ended up settling there. And their contribution are my heritage and the contribution to the country of Bharat, what it is known, and India, that includes obviously Pakistan, Afghanistan, and many other areas. And I'll just talk a bit about that as well. I'm very passionate about, as Adyantinji talked about, the history, so I won't go into detail. So I'll just quickly kind of go into the slides. As we look at the Indian cultural influence, it is the picture here, which is the yellow part is the brown part is where the major influence has been. The yellow part is where there have been movements going back and forth. And the red side is all the way into Southeast Asia, Indonesia, all the way until Philippines. And the center for this influence has been the Indus Valley civilization or Sindhu Saraswat civilization. So the impact it had across the world, as you can see in that square on the right-hand side, and all the colors here, and how it beautifully colored the world with its knowledge, compassion, and knowing the value of the truth, or even for that matter, from a self-realization standpoint. This is a picture of 1864, Samuel Augustus, a picture of Hindustan, which was called, and further India. And again, as you can see, the influence, I just want to make a point here, is the influence of Bharat has been all the way from Afghanistan all the way to the Indonesia and Philippines. And when we talk about Saraswat civilization, the first human migrated to India sometime around 50,000, 70,000 BC. And the Harappan civilization arose somewhere between 3300 and 1600 BC. And as you can see, the timeline here in this screen, it kind of talks about the evolution and how the level of understanding and when it came to understanding our own selves, understanding our world, kind of evolved as part of the Indus Valley civilization. Again, timeline about Mahabharata, when Mahabharata and Ramayana was composed, and other events, historical events which happened. I just quickly want to transition to the map of Indus Valley civilization. Here, all the brown spots are the places where these were the places which where people settled across the banks of the river. And where I come from is from the northern side of the Indus Valley civilization. All the tributaries, actually, either from Punjab or Kashmir, came in and then merged into the Sindhu River, which kind of flew into Arabian Sea. But the settlement and the influence this had on not only on the Bharat or India we know right now, on Afghanistan, Balochistan, and all the way to Iran, and all the way into Turkey, this was a major center of learning. Um, in terms of, again, the green color here is depicting the civilization, and all the red spots there are the places where people settled. And as you can see, Gagar Hakka, which is kind of considered the Saraswati River. And again, there is a lot of historical evidence, and as well as a lot of research is going on there. As you can see, the settlements there, and then the major towns, which was Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which we know from a historical standpoint, where we have seen artifacts going back to almost 5,000 years, and the evolution of that, those towns. So when I look at Hindu as an entity and Sindhu, the foundational essence of being a Hindu comes from Sindhudesh itself. And what Greeks called us as Hindus, and whereas Persians called us Hindus, and that turned into the name India, and that's how Hinduism is known. And the point here is, even with East Indies, or for that matter, even America also, where Red Indians were called Indians, so that the importance of Sindhu being Hindu and then India and Indians is immense. And that kind of gives us the understanding of the influence we had as the Indus Valley civilization. In terms of, again, the Julelal, which is the Sindhudesh's, a deity or an avatar, you may call it, is the incarnation of Varuna, which is again in the scriptures of Hinduism. This is an important, very important finding, which was as part of the excavation, and this stamp was found in the Indus Valley civilization. And this depicts Lord Shiva. As you can see, the figure is Lord Shiva, and it has all the animals around it. And this was found in the Indus Valley civilization many thousand years back. There is another artifact, very important artifact. On the left is the priest king, which is right now in Pakistan in their museum, and on the right hand side is the dancing girl, which is in the Delhi Museum. Very interesting findings in terms of the Bronze Age, because on the right hand side the statue is made of bronze, and as you can see, all the bangles, all the way on the arm, and we see that those traditions in Rajasthan, current Rajasthan as well, where females do wear those bangles all the way to their shoulders. This is another major excavation which was found as British government were laying the railway tracks, and this was identified the Great Bath. And this also had the drainage system, which was covered, which was never, even in the Mesopotamian civilization or Egyptian civilization, the advancement of science and technology and understanding of the engineering, where this bath was found, and it had all the structures around the bath where the students would come for learning, and the stupa at the top is either a temple or it's a Buddhist monastery, either or, which was found as part of the excavation. So immense heritage here in this place itself. This is one of the major findings, I would say, for the Indus Valley civilization. Moving on to some of the other, like the weighing systems, that was also found as part of the excavations. And this is an interesting finding of the toy, which had wheels. So it's understood the bull carts, and which were used as part of transportation, were already used as part of the Indus Valley civilization. And these findings kind of have proven that the civilization was if not advanced, but at par with the other civilizations, there was a lot of research done in Egypt and other Mesopotamian civilization, but there was not a lot of focus on the Indus Valley civilization. And these kind of artifacts have proved that we are much more advanced than many other civilizations. The other aspect, as the time passed, in around 400 to 600 BC, Panini was in the northwest of Pakistan, and he is considered the father of the linguistics. And he composed Ashtadhyayi, which is the grammar for Sanskrit. And I can confidently say that the language was created in the Indus Valley civilization with the artifacts we have found. And there is a symbolic language or pictorial language related script which has been found in Indus Valley civilization. I'm sure over the course of time, the folks in the Indus Valley civilization evolved into a more structured language which turned out to be Sanskrit. And as you can see, the Sanskrit has not only influenced India, but all other languages of the world. And it goes all the way to Eastern European, to Russia, to all other different countries. So this gentleman, Panini, was born in Indus Valley civilization, which is current day Pakistan. The father of music was also born in Indus Valley civilization, and this was Sharangadev, who's considered the father of music, was also born there. A great historical site in Indus Valley civilization. This is the Sharda University, where it was a board of learning towards the north side of Indus Valley civilization. Shankaracharya visited Sharda University, and in fact, the southern gate of Sharda was opened when Shankaracharya visited this place. And it is said that anyone who graduated from Varanasi took 3 or 4 steps towards Sharda, that this was the next destination for the evolution of knowledge. And I'll leave you up with this last picture here of this is the Sindh right now as it passes through Kashmir. And the interesting part of this river Sindh is the color is really white, and that is what has been talked about in our Puranas, in our scriptures about the Sindh being white and the Saraswati River being white. As you can see, the color of the water is still white. So with that, I leave you all with back to Adyatinji for the further other speakers.
Thank you very much indeed, Raj, for enlightening us about the great history of Indus Valley civilization or Saraswati Sindh civilization. So the point we are trying to make is that Sindhudesh is affiliated with a very ancient civilization. Sindhudesh is not a new phenomenon, and there's a historical bearing. It was cradle of a very important civilization that had far-reaching consequences and far-reaching influences. So I would suggest, Raji, to stop sharing your slide set. If you can discontinue sharing your slide set. Meanwhile, while you are doing that, I will introduce our next speaker. So from history of Indus Valley civilization, we want to go on to the next aspect of Sindhudesh or Sindh province in the country where it is being governed. Our next speaker is Mr. Daniel Kushachi. He is an Armenian American, and there's a special significance that he again comes from a country that has the lived experience of genocide, mass expulsions, etc. We don't have to go into that history. Mr. Daniel Kushajian is working as Director of Government Relations and Policies with HAF. He is based in Washington, D.C. He holds a BA degree in Political Science from Florida Atlantic University and a master's degree in Political Management and a graduate certificate in PACs from the George Washington University. Before joining HAF, Daniel worked as political consultant and was a candidate for the Palm Beach County Commission. He has previously worked as the grassroots directors and communication directors of the Armenian Assembly of America, where he successfully advocated on a wide array of human rights, international religious freedom, US foreign policy, and appropriations issues. Daniel was selected as 2018-2019 Fellow with the Anti-Defamation League Glass Leadership Institute, as well as in 2019 as Fellow with the James Madison Institute. Currently, he serves as the chairman of the International Religious Freedom Roundtable's South Asia Working Group. And Daniel will be talking about human rights violation in the Sindhudesh or Sindh province of Pakistan, especially treatment of minorities. So the floor is yours, Daniel. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, if I'm allowed to. And I want to also thank CSA and Dr. Adityanji for the opportunity to present here to you. I'm not seeing an option to share my screen. So if I can't do that,
You can try now.
Ripudan, can you please make Daniel a co-host so he can share his screen?
I already gave him rights to present, so can you try again?
sure. Okay. I don't see it, so I'll just give you a verbal presentation here. I don't want to keep you unless you want to skip me and come back to me, Dr. Adityanji.
I think you go ahead without the slides.
Okay,
You can
sure.
just the slides. So.
Sure. Well, I want to talk to you really briefly about 5 things. You know, Raj and others will give you a good historical background of Sindh and the province and what the situation that Hindus and religious minorities there face. But I'm going to talk to you first about what we know currently. Second, what is being reported in the media. Third, what has been the U.S. and international community response to Pakistani transgressions? Fourth, what HAF has done lately and what we are doing now. That's typically the questions we get. Well, what are you doing lately? And fifth, what is the current state of U.S.-Pakistan relations under President Biden? Okay. I just got the notice here that I'm the co-host, so let's see if that will give me an opportunity to share my screen. No, it's not giving me the option. So I'm just going to get into it then. So what do we know? The most recent news and violations that we're hearing about that are gaining attention are threefold, really. Almost daily, we're now hearing of temple destructions in Pakistan. The prime minister had promised to rebuild 400 temples in his tenure. As we know, temples in capitals have been halted construction, while others have been destroyed by angry mobs. Most recently, in Sindh province, there was an attack after a young Hindu boy was accused of blasphemy, and there was a mob attack. There has been, as we all know, the most prominent and pressing issue, and one that HAF has been focused on, is the kidnapping of young Hindu girls. You have Hindu, Christian, and Sikh girls, but predominantly it's Hindu girls who are preyed upon. And one of the things that we've been focused on is changing the narrative, because when you hear the word conversion, it sounds like a legal term, right? It comes off as something that people can do willingly and freely of their own volition. Even when you call it a forced conversion, it kind of sounds like it's kind of legal, right? And then you talk about the abductions and kidnappings of young girls. This is This is human trafficking. This is sexual slavery. And until we start to call it by its proper name and use the words that inspire and depict urgency and tragedy, and get the imagination going as if this was your own daughter or your niece, then we're not going to get the attention that we rightfully need on this issue. It's gotten so bad to the point where 1,000 Hindu, Sikh, Christian girls under the age of 10 are kidnapped, forcefully converted against their will into a religion that's not their own, and married off or sold into trafficking and sexual slavery. And the pipeline, as we now know, goes from Sindh, Pakistan, east to China, or west to Iran. And that's where a lot of these girls, unfortunately, end up. They're promised marriages and husbands and all of this and that if they're not kidnapped and abducted and taken from their homes at gunpoint. In many cases, we heard the case of the Lal girl who was her father gave a passionate plea in front of the courthouse, and threatened suicide, but that case hasn't been resolved. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, we heard the story of Reena Mawar being returned to her parents. This is the first time I've seen a Hindu girl actually, her court papers in Pakistan nullified, and said that these papers were forgeries and these papers were not legitimate, and she can go back to her parents. Now, why the abductor hasn't been arrested yet is a very good question. That's a good thing that we've had this Hindu girl returned to her parents, but there needs to be justice. And when you have a Pakistani prime minister who jokes about the rape of women and saying, well, they need to dress a little bit better, it's no wonder that women are treated so horrifically in his country, that young girls are kidnapped and raped and sold into sexual slavery. So that's some of the things that that's being said in the media. That's some of the things that we know about that's happening in Pakistan, particularly in Sindh province, and some of the things that HAF is doing about it. Now, real quick before I wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about what the U.S. international community, the U.S. and the international community has been doing in response to Pakistan. And a lot of this is in response to Pakistan's human rights, international religious freedoms violations, as well as Pakistan's blatant support of terrorism. First, Pakistan was placed on the Financial Action Task Force gray list in 2017. And they've been consistently on that list and threatened to be on the black list, which basically completely cuts off all international investments, foreign direct investments or FDI, trade, etc. You're basically cut off entirely from the world, with Korea and Iran. Second, the following year in 2018, the United States suspended all U.S. military aid to Pakistan. Think about that. It was up until 2018, the U.S. government had been supplying Pakistan, a terror state, a country that I call to people when I'm talking to them in Washington as the Iranian regime of South Asia, the largest state sponsor of terrorism, largest violator of international religious freedom and human rights in the world. I mean, very close second to the Taliban, essentially, is what you have in Pakistan. And so that's again some of the ways that we have to start talking about Pakistan here in the United States, right? The Americans know a lot more about the Taliban these days, I would venture to say, than they do about Pakistan. So when you start talking about the analogies and the correlations between Pakistan and Taliban. So that was in 2018. We finally suspended U.S. military aid, and that was 3 years ago. And that's been the case all 3 years since then. Third, in 2019, the following year, Pakistan was added to the State Department's International Religious Freedom Violators list of countries of particular concern, or CPCs. And I'm sorry I don't have a presentation with you to give you, so apologies for just the verbal, but I had some really good slides to show you the CPC designation in 2019 which has been consistent 1920 and will be most likely coming again in 2021, opens them up, Pakistan, up to really harsh sanctions, and it puts them in the category of China, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. There are other things too that have been done. This is some of the less reported stuff. The U.S. military is actually holding up an export license to Turkey for the production of a joint attack helicopter that Turkey hopes to sell to Pakistan, but they need U.S. technology export license in order to do so. The U.S. has been holding that back for about 3-4 years now. And from my understanding is the Department of Defense does not intend on releasing that export license to Turkey to sell attack helicopters, Turkish-made attack helicopters to Pakistan. So that's some of the other things that our government is kind of doing behind the scenes that you may not hear about in response to the Pakistani regime. Third and fourth, U.S. Congress has done a couple of things. One, last Congress, they passed House Resolution 512 in the House and Senate, which was about calling for the global end to blasphemy and apostasy laws. And the biggest violator listed in that resolution was Pakistan and what's going on in Sindh Congress. So the United States Congress is on record when it comes to outlining and singling out Pakistan for its international religious freedom and human rights violations. It's extreme religious laws. And so what are some of the things that are happening now under U.S.-Pakistan relations? Do I have the time, Dr. Adityanji, or do you need me to stop and save that for Q&A? U.S.-Pakistan relations under the
I'd like you to stop at this juncture and
Okay, I
see.
figured you did. I saw the light go off. So if someone wants to ask me about the current state of U.S.-Pakistan relations under the Biden administration, I'd be happy to talk about it. But at this time, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for giving us details of human rights violation in Pakistan, especially in Sindh province, because that is one of the larger provinces after Baluchistan. We have a third panel member, and that is Mr. Zafar Saito. He's the chief organizer and founder of Jeay Sindh Freedom Movement. He is currently living in exile in United States. He is a civil engineering graduate and has also a graduate degree in art. He started his political career from student politics from Jeay Sindh Student Federation in year 2000. He is a prominent speaker, writer on human rights violations and persecution of minorities by Pakistan. He has been lobbying for the freedom for Sindhudesh worldwide. He was personally persecuted by Pakistani intelligence agencies on charges of supporting the political movement and resistance movement of Sindhudesh in 2015. Since then, he left Pakistan and has been living in exile. He is leading the freedom movement struggle, and his Twitter handle is @Vidyarthi, which means a student. So I now invite our next speaker, Zafar Saito.
Namaskar, everyone. This Namaskar is our Sindhu Saraswati Mata civilization. Just a greeting to everyone, because Namaskar was our Indus Valley civilization and Sindhu Saraswati Mata civilization greeting posture. Thank you very much, CSA team and Dr. Adityanji, President CSA, all estimated guests and panelists. I'm thankful to you for providing me this platform to go on and discuss about Sindhudesh. The topic, the question of Sindhudesh. So before going to topic of Sindhudesh, I would say that first we have to understand that what is id. What is nation? What is race? What is nationalism? What is the state country, national country? Until we will not understand these terms, these phrases, we cannot reach on the your state or your country or state country which you belong. So race means aid, race, nation, nationalism, state or your national country is the way of recognizing you or giving you the identity which you belong historically, culturally, your geography, your socio-economy, your identity, your geostrategic location, your national resources. I am thankful to Raj Kaulji. Already he discussed about the history of my great country, my motherland, from which I belong. I belong from Rajasthan. I am Rajput. My ancestors, they came from Rajasthan to Sindh. Actually, it was the same Sindh, Rajputana and Sindh. When Arab attacked in 711, when they attacked on Sindh, on the last Hindu Sindhi Raja, Maharaja Daher, our ancestors moved from Rajputana to Mohenjo-daro, Nowshera Feroz, Nawab Shah, and it is the center of Sindh. It is the center of Sindh. Our ancestors fought with Arab invaders in support of Raja Daher, that Arabs should not conquer it. So, Sindhudesh was from Indus Valley civilization 7,000 years before, 15,000 years before, from Mahabharata, from Rigved, from Ramayana, Sindhu Saraswati Mata, the Ghaggar Hakro river or Indus Valley civilization, you know, Saraswati Mata river is Ghaggar Hakro. Still Ghaggar Hakro is there. When we have a identity, a history, a socio-economical and heritage of so much importance, why now we are living in misery? Why we are living and we are forced to live in slavery? We are living in 21st century and it is our right, it is our natural right that there was no Pakistan before 74 years, but Sindhudesh was there 7,000 years before. Our last Raja, Maharaja Daher, was slain by Arabs. That time there was an independent Sindhudesh. 1843, when British invaded Sindh, they attacked at port of Karachi. There was Sindhudesh, Free Sindh. After 100 years of slavery of British, when they left this region, they created a fake, unnatural country which was called Pakistan, which is based on two-nation theory. I am surprised that is there any nation which is consisting of religion? Is there any nation that the actual definition of nation, if we look in 18th or 19th century, is your history, your language, your culture, your heritage. In modern days, we call it your economical and social values. So if we combine these all terms, a nation is which is having history, which is having culture, heritage, land, tradition, identity, a psychological impact on the world. And to keep that identity of yours, you need a state, your own national state. If you don't have your own national state, you cannot save yourself. You will be destroyed. You will be wasted like a trash bin. So why Sindhudesh? Because Sindhudesh was there 7,000 years before, 15,000 years before. Even the Muslims who took the idea of Adam and Eve, it was in Sindh that Shivaji and Parvati Mata was introduced in our theologies. That all concept was taken from there. Rajji told me that Jhulelal was the incarnation of Varunji. Still 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 years before, we had the traces of Lingam in Tharparkar, in Mohenjo-daro, in Dadu, everywhere. We had the traces of Shivji. Sevistan or Shivistan, nowadays it is called the Seven, Sakhi Shahbaz Kalandar, Mast Kalandar. Actually, it was the place of Shivji, Shiv Astan. Now it is converted as Seven. So, Sindhudesh is necessary for us to keep not only our identity, but our heritage, our culture, our race, our history of Indus Valley civilization, Sindhu Saraswati Mata civilization, Gaghar or Hakdo river, Saraswati Mata. It is not still discovered. If you want to discover the Saraswati Mata civilization, Pakistan must be balkanized. If Pakistan will be not balkanized, how you will connect to your roots? To reach your roots, more than religious point of view, I will say to definition for the religion is culture. How you can describe your religion, because these are your cultural values, these are your social and economical values, your traditions. So to reach our identity, our race, our nation, our nationalism, our state country, we must to reach to our roots. And where are these roots? Saraswati Sindhu civilization, Indus Valley civilization, and in Mahabharata, Jaydhat was from Sindhudesh. Jaydhat was from Sindhudesh. So I would like to appreciate Daniel Ji regarding he gave us good points about the human rights violation in Sindh. But I want to just say a few words here about that in Sindh, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Today I tweeted there are Punjabis, Pakistani. They also go against the Pakistani army or military or intelligence and establishment, but nobody is still abducted or killed. Only Sindhi, Pashtun, and Baloch are always abducted and killed. We are living in 21st century. It is our right to live freely with our will, with our country. Pakistan's, if we look that, okay, Sindhudesh, why it is necessary, Sindhudesh? Because Sindhudesh is giving 65%. Sindhudesh is giving, generating 65% all its natural resources, its economical revenue, its port, the values from the port. It is all from Sindh. Sindh is producing economy for Pakistan. And same time, people of Sindh are deprived to live in a miserable life. You cannot find, like today I was reading one report published that 55% Sindhi people are lacking from basic needs of human, basic needs of human, which is always be there. Like 55% people, they don't have gas. When we are producing 75% natural gas for the Pakistan, 75% people they don't have the water, pure water. People goes for miles for drinking water. When we are descendants of Indus River, what is Indus River? This is Sindhu River. This is our Sindhu River. And Sindhu River, people of Sindhu River are just going for miles for one glass of water. In
Zafar, can you
2000,
conclude, please?
yeah. So if Vidyanji, my time is up, no problem. I will stop here, and later, if there will be more questions, I will come on these, and I would like to listen Daniel ji for Indo-Pakistan and American relations later, if he will get the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Zafar, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Sagir Sheikh. Dr. Sagir Sheikh is an IT and design consultant. He holds a PhD degree. He is based in California. He is the organizer or director of the World Sindhi Congress, the US chapter. And that is very important for us to understand that World Sindhi Congress is basically a member of UNPO. It represents the Sindhudesh in UNPO, which is Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. So just like you have UNO, you have UNPO, an organization of nations and people that are not represented in the United Nations. So it is a very important organization, World Sindhi Congress. Dr. Sheikh has been very active in different social and political forums. He has been advocating for human rights and, very importantly, right to self-determination of the Sindhi people. So I give the floor to you, Dr. Sagir Sheikh. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Adyanji and the Council of Strategic Affairs. I really appreciate this opportunity. I will make my remarks brief on just basically jumping on more sort of a modern political scenario in the Sindhudesh movement or movement for the freedom of Sindh. So basically, Sindhis started to feel marginalized from day one of becoming a part of Pakistan in 1947. The primary reason that was that the long promised and publicly declared manifesto of All India Muslim League, to which Sindhis agreed to join Pakistan, was promising them that all constituent units joining Pakistan would be autonomous and sovereign. Contrary to this fact, Pakistan from day one ends up working as a solidly centrifugal state, completely denying the thousands of years of identities, as two previous speakers mentioned, of its constituent nations, that is, Bengalis, Sindhis, Punjabis, Balochs, and Pakhtuns. The second most reason or is a setback which made Sindhis completely disappointed with Pakistan was this unexpected migration or what I would call exodus of Sindhi Hindus from Sindh. Sindh had about 25% of Hindu and 75% of Muslims and other population. But the engineer migration of Indian Muslims, which was engineered to be populated in Sindh, was created by the state-sponsored machinery that planned to kick out Sindhi Hindus out of their homes, and they end up being in India and maybe some other parts of the world. As a result, Sindhi lost the most viable middle educated urban class in terms of the Sindhi Hindu exodus. And then obviously the economical, political, cultural, and environmental, and obviously exploitation continues from the central state of Pakistan towards the Sindhi people and Sindhi nation. But the real call for the Sindh, as we know as a Sindhudesh now, came from our modern leader as James Syed, who envisioned basically that it, that's after the 71 mayhem when Pakistan, East Pakistan did a big land, genocide of Bangladeshis. Of West Pakistan did the genocide of Bangladeshis in East Pakistan. That mayhem and atrocity made Syed thought that this is going to be the destiny of Pakistan. And obviously, that mayhem resulted in some good news where Bangladesh became a free and liberated nation. So that inspired James Syed. He opined that the inherent balance of these nations in Pakistan, especially citing the example of Bangladesh, where even they won the landslide victory, never got a right to even form the government. And the Punjab elite as a military will treat Sindh as a colony, and it behaves as an imperial power in the region. The secondly, he argued, Syed, for the idea of Sindhudesh. He said in Sindh's DNA has a Muslim-Hindu coexistence and harmony, and universalism based on the thousands of years of Sufi and Vedanta school of thought, which both two speakers already mentioned too. So he said that this kind of DNA which we Sindhis have ought to come in contradiction with the Islamic ideology, warmongering ideology of Pakistan based on religio nationalism and Muslim nationhood. Thus, he saw it as an inherent contradiction, not only in terms of inequality and marginalization of Sindhi people and Sindhi nation, but also he saw it as an ideological contradiction too. Thus, he formed his and he proposed as a concept of free Sindh, and he named this as a Sindhudesh. That is why we call him a visionary of a modern Sindhi nation. Now, if you sort of further analyze that, and that will give you sort of a flavor of the movement, that what Sindhudesh movement is today, and what are its pillars, will give you an insight. But GM says laid that out in his writings and in his work. He said, number one, he clearly said Sindhi is a nation. But he also said at the same time that accept the political realities of its boundaries. Don't talk what happened before 47. Don't go into the history of 5,000 years. Oh, Sindhis lived in Rajasthan, Sindhis lives in Balochistan. It's good to be proud of that history. But accept the modern Sindhi boundaries as its nation. And that is a called there's a political name for it. It's called irredentism. So he actually he kind of refuted the irredentism. He says accept the boundaries, and that the second pillar of his, he clearly says that not only that you recognize yourself as a nation and you are a nation, but there Pakistan is not a nation at all. In fact, Pakistan is a multi-nation polity consisting of historical nations of Punjabi, Bangladeshi, Sindhi, Baloch, and Pakhtun. So it calls it a multinational country or multinational polity. And he says that current structure of Pakistan is not a true federation in any sense and based on equality. And he says all nations must have a parity in power, no matter how numerically they are superior or less in numerical. So the parity can only be achieved through the right to self-determination, because this will give a tool and it necessitated the fairness among these nations in Pakistan. And finally, he said this must all be achieved through the non-violence means. He was inspired by Gandhi to larger extents and the other historical figures of South Asia as a Guru Nanak and Mahatma Buddha and so on. And then he says the right to self-determination will give us a tool to negotiate a possibility for fairness in Pakistan, and that right can be exercised to become either a part of a status quo if they want to, or be a union to some other country, neighboring country, or become a independent country. That is the will of the people. That is what right to self-determination provides it. So I'm going to finish it. So this is the position of World Sindhi Congress, which is a human rights advocacy and education group based in UK, US, and Canada. We believe that it's an inalienable right for Sindhis to have a right to self-determination. May it be for independent country, join other union, or a status quo. It will be too presumptuous for me or a small organization like World Sindhi Congress to assume one outcome or the other. Now, I personally am a dreamer of a Sindhudesh from not now, from a childhood, from the day one I read the first book of G.M. Syed. But I cannot speak of 50 million other Sindhis. Thus, but I do know one thing. They all want to have right to self-determination, where they make their own fate decision about their own fate and fate of their nationhood and their identity. That is why our position, through this position, we represent Sindhi nation in the UNPO, as Mr. Adantaji mentioned, and show our commitment to those two major causes, which is right to self-determination and the non-violence. So finally, so I agree that Sindh needs help from international community to raise this voice and plight to gain this legitimate right to exercise their will. However, the national self-determination struggle must remain non-violent. It must remain secular and become not a victim of any communal or religious nationalism we see proliferating in this world and especially in South Asia. If one is to be the friend of Sindh, it has to be based on human rights, equality, international recognition of right to self-determination and non-violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sheikh, for that beautiful, sort of enunciation of the principles of modern Sindhudesh, the secular polity, a modern, nation state with right to self-determination that has been denied to it historically.
Thank you
We
very
are
much.
going into question and answer session. I would expect all the audience to put their questions into the chat function. We prefer chat function rather than people, speaking their questions. Before I take questions from the audience, I have two questions. And the first question is for Dr. Sheikh. And that question is bringing it to the modern geopolitics. What comments do you have about, attempts to separate Karachi under Article 149 by the federal government of Pakistan from Sindhudesh or Sindh province? And what comments do you have about the PIDA ordinance on federal government acquiring the islands of Buddho and Bandal belonging to Sindh, and with the possibility of selling those islands to China in lieu of the $64 billion debt incurred by the federal government of Pakistan on CPEC.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And it's a very, very big topic, but I'll try to be honestly to be brief and to the point. So if you scrap the layers of the Sindhudesh movement and the inequality I was talking to you, okay, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
You will find that it's a struggle for a environmental justice. And if you take the layers out of the Punjabi imperialism and Pakistan's imperialism, you will find the core is the greed and the money and appropriation of the resources. And you put both together, you will see that now Pakistan and Punjab want to dominate Sindh and other suppressed nations in Pakistan and engage in the war with India, deliberate war with India, and war in Afghanistan, only and only to gain financial benefit for their own elite, especially Punjabi military elite. And unfortunately, for 40 years, and I've linked to the second part of the question, the Urdu speaking people, which now most of them call themselves as Sindhi, and Sindhis have wholeheartedly have accepted from day one as to be Sindhi, were the partners in Punjab in doing all this warmongering and denying the historical rights of the Sindhi people. But from last 20, 30 years, many of them have understood it, the second generation and third generation, that how Punjab and Pakistan is exploiting Sindh's resources, taking away their lands, selling Pakistan as a whole and Sindh and Balochistan specifically strategically important ports to China, who has become its only so-called friend in the world. Pakistan doesn't have any other friend. And that friend is also, of course, there for exploitation. There's no doubt about it. CPEC, everyone knows, from all the professors in Oxford University to the big newspaper, hundreds of articles written on CPEC, how exploitative this is. But there is a very minor population in Urdu speaking people in Sindh. They have been co-opted by the central government, giving them giving them ministries and so on, who are creating this so-called Karachi separation of Karachi and so on thing. But it's a very unpopular movement, and it is only to divide the people of Sindh. It doesn't have any significance. Nevertheless, designs are there. I agree with that. I will conclude myself. Sorry, I can't hear. You are mute, Mr. Adit. Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Sheikh. I have a couple of questions for Zafar Sato. Zafar, question number one is, why in all these elections, Sindhi parties have never come to power? What's the reason? The Sindh movement has fractured, parties have splintered. Why can't Sindhi party get their act together and win an election in a democracy? That is question number one.
You are mute, Zafar.
Yeah. Sir, I think in before section I was gone in history, and then Sagir Sheikh Sagir Sheikh has completed the previous section after 1947. So when British was created in 1947, 1948 ISI was created, and ISI was created by British government. And from day first, when ISI was created, they in 1956 they applied the one unit on in Pakistan, and after one unit everything was controlled and engineered by Pakistani intelligence agencies. They was the main stakeholders in whole Pakistan. So whoever they wanted to bring in the power to control the center, they bring for themselves, okay, to serve their best interests. That's why 1971 accident of Bangladesh happened when Sheikh Mujib gained more seats, but they was denied to rule because they said that okay, Bengalis are weak, they cannot control the things, they cannot they are not eligible for the military, they are not eligible to govern the country. Same thing they made to us. From day first they said Sindhi people are just agents of India. They are not good Muslims. They are weak. They are ignorant. They have nothing, and they actually Sindh has feudal system, and feudal people or feudal who govern the Sindh, they are the best servant of these Punjabi or Punjabi military and Pakistani military. So only since 1970 or afterwards, Pakistan People's Party, who is the ruling party in Sindh, which is good servant of Pakistan military, because they get 10%, 15%. They are the party of feudals. All landlords and money lords you will find with them. And the second part, they got the Urdu speaking, we call them Urdu speaking Sindhis, but they call them Mahajan nation still. They are some people are with us, but they were also used for power government and federal government. So they were also used by Pakistani dominant Punjabi military, and feudals was also got the power. That's why middle class or poor class Sindhi people, mostly 55% Sindhi people are farmers. We are agricultural people. So they are controlled by these landlords and feudals. So we didn't got the chance that we come from grassroots or from from our roots to form an alliance. But as in 1972, Saint James had announced the Sindhudesh, I gave us the ideology and announced the Sindhudesh movement. Uh, they first IGM said, if you will join for the central government voting system or parliamentary system, already you have example of Sheikh Mujib, so you cannot get that your right through the parliament system. So that's why we Sindhi nationalist Sindhis has always denied for the voting system. We don't.
Thank you, sir. You've answered the question. I
Thank you.
have second question for you.
Yes, sir.
You were tortured personally by Pakistani agencies, intelligence agencies.
Yes, sir.
Now, these agencies are very ruthless
Mhm.
and known to kill